Joe Woods.
No, it just reminded me of something. It wasn't Joe Woods, but I was talking again about my role and the role of my people. And the two things I remember is I actually, despite my accurate description of the overall real importance to the outcome of what I did, the two things that perhaps are in tension with each other. First is I was one of the only people that I got a promotion. On the 18th of June, I now know, which is how I know it. I think it had something to do with Joe Woods leaving, but I may be wrong. I went from associate special counsel to senior associate special counsel, and the reason was that I had all these people working for me who were still working. He never told me this was the reason, but I think he wanted to make clear that they were to the people in the staff, that they were my responsibility, and they, in turn, spoke through me. And I was given a position that recognized what I was doing because I had so many people under supervision, and that supervisory, a little late perhaps, but that supervisory role, being the intermediary between John and the staff. I think that's probably why I did it. But so, I'll tell you the other story. I just tumbled out while I was looking at some of my papers for the first time in all these decades. And that was John, and I think it was in March, but I won't swear to March, April. John, according as I can see from this memo, had given us a presentation to the entire staff, doubtless in the library. It's the only space that was big enough, and about where the impeachment inquiry is and what people are doing. Progress report, pat people on the back. And I went back to my office and I sent him a memo. And I said, John, I understand what's important, and that's fine. But you mentioned virtually nothing about what my 8 or 9 people and I are doing. I said, would you please? I said, it's extremely important. And I think I probably even underscored extremely was so important. Would you please talk to my people one-on-one and tell them what a wonderful job they're doing? And, but that gives you some idea of the sense of, we're all working awful hard, and we were, I don't know, use your own metaphor, and that I surely didn't remember writing that, but it says something about what was going on. Now,
does it give you, should we interpret
yes,
that there was a morale problem?
There was, at that time, for that reason only. Look, morale problem. There was a morale problem after that in my group, because the Express was heading over there. Here we have a train again. Express is heading there. It was a big deal, and here we are sitting in the local station waiting for the local to come by.
Why? But you were working on some of the most important issues.
It was not according to his. They may or may not be. Leave that as I described them. They're pretty important. But leave that aside. I'm not talking about substance here. I'm talking about the report that he made. And everybody. John is a great general, but he doesn't do it by coming and hugging his troops. He does it by being a general. I mean, you know, he's and that can sometimes not be so good for morale if you wonder what am I doing here? Why am I here? Why have I done this? And when you go in there and you give a 45 5-minute presentation or a 20-minute presentation about where we are, and you take this group and you don't mention what they're doing, this is not good for morale. And wouldn't be surprised if I use the word morale in there.
And this was a 45-minute presentation to all 101?
My best recollection was to the whole staff.
Wow.
It may not have been, it may have just been to the lawyers, but it was, yeah. And
so you had a room where you could put everybody in.
Yeah. Yes, I remember. That was Maureen's room. That's Maureen's room. When we had a farewell sit around when we all talked. John Doerr came in, and it was just after the resignation. And everybody went around and said something, and I said, we've all been reading about how we are the unsung heroes of Watergate. I said, I don't know about anybody else, but Bernie and me, we didn't come here to be unsung. But, there was a little of this, you're supposed to be quiet, you're supposed to be in the back. And so what matters is the general gets up there and says, we're gonna hit Omaha Beach. And he said, Jesus, I'm going to Juno Beach. And nobody mentions Juno Beach, they're all talking about Omaha Beach. And yes, that, there was a sense of heart, yeah.
What was the sense among your staff after the committee approved Article 2?
I think, satisfaction, I'm sure. But I think what was clear, I remember joking with John in the committee room about the fact that not only were we Article 2, but Article 2 got McCrory's vote. We had one more vote than Article 1 got. And I'm not quoting him accurately, but he looked at me and says, this is all about Watergate. Or, it will be remembered as it's Article 1. It's Article 1 that this was about. It wasn't about Article 2. And I said, okay. Sure, he's right. It was. So my answer is, I was much more excited about Article 1 than I was about Article 2. It was having said what I said about our own individual work, at the same time, I don't know if that, lack of morale is one thing. Jealousies are another thing. And what we do is important or isn't important. We weren't treated that way at all by other staff. We were never treated by other staff as being anything but a part of the operation, and the operation succeeded, and it'd be a terrible mistake for me to come away with the impression or leave the impression that that isn't part of what John Doerr did, was to make us all feel that way. But this particular incident says something about sensitivities generally, says something about sensitivities in my group, and the need to worry about them.
Presumably, all of you had voted in a presidential election at some time.
Yes, I had.
Before you took this job. Was there some attempt to balance the number, or to have a certain number of Republicans?
Oh yes, absolutely.
How did you keep partisanship at the door? How did you park it at the door?
The question can be asked was how successful we were at doing that. But John was very good about that. And if somebody said, I won't say who, but somebody said something that sounded partisan in a meeting or something, and John got him and said, you don't do that. I know you have a liberal background, and I knew when I hired you, but for heaven's sake, don't do that. Don't do it. Don't do it. I got caught in it once with partisanship. I had come home for a few hours, I think, just to see if the place was still here. We spent a day. I never spent more than a day away in 7 months from my job, from my office. Spent a day away with my wife and kids, presumably. And while I was there, there's a partner, a young partner at Skadden Arps. I may not have this right, but the point of the story is accurate. And I went up and I interviewed this guy. Just wanted to talk to him about something. I knew he was here, and it was just who signed a deed or something having to do with IT&T, or who signed a settlement, or something along those lines. It's a minor point, but I wanted to nail it down, so I went over. And when I came back, that's the only time I really kind of got myself in this sort of trouble, because I hadn't taken a Republican along with me. I think it was generally understood that you had even when they were intermixed as they were working with me, that there were some Republicans there, and they had been pointed through the Republicans in the committee. And I'm quite sure, although I have my recollection is not direct but indirect. That is, I don't actually remember being told that we had to do that, but I knew that that was expected. And so to that extent, yeah, you always did have that. But lawyers, you get a lawyer and you say you're on this side, prosecute. They'll prosecute. And not only that, it's the wonderful thing about the legal system is by the time they're about 3 minutes into it, they'll be sure the guy is guilty. I mean, you know, the whole advocacy system is you get into it, you're told to do it, and you're told to take a side and to advocate that side.
At what point
Yeah.
did the staff understand they had to take a side?
And speeding?
Maybe I misunderstood you.
No, we're talking about taking sides.
Yes.
And the fact of the matter is that they didn't. That the problem is, as we were talking about a long time ago, as a human being, you're told to look into this matter. And as somebody, you want it to be big and it to be important. Everybody feels that way. And there's a certain, a sense that you want to find something there. If you don't, you don't. But that was not partisan. And that was just human. And you had to not give in to that, and you had to be objective. And if they weren't objective, I had to be objective for them. And John had to be objective for all of us. But there was no sense. I can't. If you read me a list of the people on my substaff, I would be hard put to remember exactly. I mean, I guess I might be able to figure out who was a so-called minority and who was not a member. But it didn't, at that level, it just didn't work that way. It did work that way when you get to the Bill Weld. What was his name? Sam Garrison, who's no longer with it. There were Republican people, part of the Republican minority staff and that was different. They had their own office down the hall, and they treated with one another, not with. They were really a minority staff, and they were different. These people were integrated into the staff, and I wouldn't have been able to tell you why, who was from which, and in fact, the whole burden, ultimately, I guess, the burden of my story about making this mistake of going without a minority member to interview somebody, is it didn't occur to me there's anything wrong with that, because we weren't operating that way in any meaningful sense, and the thought that some minority person had to be with me when I was mopping up a piece of the story surprised me.
Just so
Yeah.
I promise in other interviews I'll ask this so that we have sort of a
Yeah.
mosaic. But so that we understand the structure of the inquiry.
Yeah, fair enough.
Joe Woods and Bernie Nussbaum were John Doerr's deputies, right?
You know, I don't know.
Okay, well, I'll
No,
ask. But I mean, you did not report through them. You
That's the
reported
point.
directly to.
That's the point.
But they're around. I mean, as you mentioned them in a number of stories.
Yeah.
Are they there as senior colleagues, as
Yes, no,
advisors?
senior colleagues is the way they would treat me and the way I would treat them, and that's I would, it was something
Ministers
where.
without portfolio? Ministers without portfolio?
Oh, they had plenty of portfolios. No, I'm kidding. I had the sense of there being colleagues working on things that may have been more important to the overall scope of what we were doing, but senior colleagues, and we had exactly the same title. In fact, one of the ironies, perhaps, is that Burt Jenner, as you know, eventually turned down the Rolls Minority Council at some point, and so when we were finished, he had the same title that we had. There were 5 or 6 of us who had that title. But I did not report to them. I would look. We had to interview. It was a hard interview, having to do with either the papers or the San Clemente property. And Bernie did that. I didn't do it. Bernie was a real litigator, as we like to say, and I wasn't. If it came to a difficult constitutional question, that was Joe Wood's bailiwick, and he did it, and he had some. Gosh, John Leibovitz is one of the smartest, best constitutional lawyers I've ever met. But he was in charge until the same memo that said John also got a promotion in the sense that he became the head of the legal staff when Joe Woods, the lawmen, when Joe Woods left. I don't know that they changed his title, but nor that. So long as your title wasn't going down, it was one of the kind of Washington jokes, whether you were senior, deputy assistant or assistant deputy, which was higher.
Did you ever get a request from the minority council to look into something?
The answer is no. But the simple answer is no, but I don't know where that would have come from. I don't remember where these categories came from. They seem to be pre-formed by the Irving Committee and others. So I don't. The simple answer is no. But the additional answer is I don't even remember John Doerr coming in, may have, saying there are these 3 things that have been raised. Maybe he did, but they would come from across the street from some congressman. But I definitely don't remember any minority person saying, look into this. No, I don't.
Well, just to perhaps find exculpatory or...
No. Again, I would... There was politics across the street. And there was surely, there was a minority staff, and they were there to represent the minority, and the minority, by and large, at least, was, well, ask Bill Well. I didn't much pay attention to that. I had no responsibility for it. They were there. I was nice to them. I saw Burt Jenner from time to time, and we did some things together and did some interviews together. And as both Evan and Richard Gill remind me, Richard Gill himself was a Republican. Now he was a Republican from Alabama, where the Republicans were the great civil rights fighters, the white civil rights judges who did the most for civil rights law were Republicans, I think. He's one of his partners. But it was banged into our heads over and over again, and we believed it. that this was nonpartisan, what we were doing jobs as lawyers, and that we were acting as lawyers. Now, maybe I'm not sophisticated about those. I'm not. I don't know what goes on there, or what I didn't understand. But we really thought, and the fact that we can have this conversation, and the notion that Dick Gill is being a Republican is an afterthought. I mean, we were great friends then. We are great friends now, and it wasn't that kind of fish or fowl atmosphere in terms of that group of us, this half of the office, that were dealing with facts and probably even law, although that would be more a matter that you'd have to ask some of these other people who did know. I didn't, but I certainly never felt from either side. I mean, we were never prosecutors until were we ever? I guess there comes a point when you're arguing for impeachment and you're having articles of impeachment. Yeah, you are a prosecutor, or at least a plaintiff. But we were told to do a lawyerly job, and we wanted to, and that's our background by and large. After all, our strength was that we were brought there as lawyers, and young lawyers. John, I think. It's interesting to me that Bernie Nussbaum at 30, leave aside Dick Cates, who's a wonderful guy, but he was hired by the committee before, and he was not part of the process that brought us together. But the rest of us, Bernie at the age of 36 was the old man. And mostly they were younger. Everybody else was younger. I was a couple of years younger. And most were much younger than that, late 20s. And people like, and I don't know anything about why, but he had his kitchen cabinet of Owen Fisk, Burke Marshall, and Bob Owen, who came back and would show up, as far as I knew, at the middle of the night, and the next morning I would see drafts that were, I don't know whether officially or unofficially, that were dated, that had a line on the top, 4:15, 2 a.m., 4:15, 4 a.m., 4:15, each successive draft. But he was close to them, but they were older. The older people, he liked having young soldiers. And he could, for the same reason that if you're in a battle, you really do want 18-year-olds and 22-year-olds and maybe a 23 or 24-year-old. But people will go into battle for you and not think that they're generals when they're not, and are very, very, very talented and were bound to become generals. So he liked having young people. He did the same thing at the Civil Rights Division. He was in a great battle, and I think you can argue he needs a great cause too. I think he had trouble. He needed a cause that's smart, effective, first line. That's a terrible way to say it, but the kind of person you'd want to hire, no matter who you were hiring. He wanted people for whom it was they thought they were doing something terribly important. B, they would do it John's way. And that's what we all were. Doing it John's way, having a leader and respecting a leader, it didn't mean we couldn't send him an email saying, you didn't do this, and excuse me, strike that. Send him a memo and say, I don't think so, could I talk to you? if you did it directly to him, that was fine, didn't mind that. But he wanted people who would, these big staff, important things, and they had to be willing to do that and kind of subordinate their egos a little bit. And I'm not sure he's been good in his life. You can ask some other people who know more about the rest of his life and the rest of his practice. But I don't think he's awfully good unless it's a big case, and I'm not sure he's as effective. He would be great as a jury. He's the kind of jury lawyer who, the really good jury lawyers who are used to arguing before a jury, the jury will acquit their client and say, gee, he had a wonderful lawyer. The great ones are the ones who their client will be acquitted, and the jurors will say, gee, that guy really, he was innocent. His lawyer wasn't very good. That scruffy guy wasn't very good. John had that ability to get stuff across and still be self-effacing, sort of, and mumble a little bit. And so the old jury lawyer. But I'm not sure he had a happy experience when he took on the Eastman Kodak case after he left. And I don't know very much about it. I know that Bob Owen represented a fellow named Malin Perkins. And Malin Perkins had worked for John Doerr at the firm Donovan Leisure. No. Maybe it was. Yeah, I guess it was that. Who was, and John had this army of lawyers going, but it was a private antitrust case, I think. And Malin Perkins wound up in jail because he had withheld evidence. There was some evidence he should have turned over. I don't remember anything, except I know he was in jail for 30 days. And I know Bob Owen represented him at some point in this. He probably helped him get a plea. And my sense about it was, it's not fair to say because I'm saying it out of school and I haven't talked to anybody about it, not Bob Owen. But my sense is that if you didn't have something, kind of a war that people were going to, I'm not sure how good a leader he would be where he had to go in and tell these 8 people who were terribly disappointed he didn't meet him, didn't mention their work, the kind of politics at that level. They had to really be committed to a cause that they really believed in, and they were very good. And they could, the 8 people in private practice would have said, "What the hell am I doing this for?" And they would have had their resumes out, you know, by nightfall. So, in a great cause, he was a great leader, but it wasn't fun.
It wasn't fun.
It wasn't, well, there you get back. It was not, I've had so much fun. I swore at the time. I remember saying, first 2 things, that I will never tell somebody it was fun, because it wasn't. It was hard, and it was late, and it was scary. I swore not to read anything about it for 5 years, or just to let it pass away and then go back to it, which I didn't do until 3 weeks ago. But and so for me, no, it was hard. We had much too much to do. It was much too ego suppressing. Nobody, we were at best unsung. We ranged from being unsung heroes to being ciphers. I mean, that's the way, and that's what we were supposed to be. And we knew that's what we were supposed to be. That doesn't make for a great time unless you have other people who are talented and lovely people. I remember my camaraderie as being, my then wife said she understood the notion of being born again. She thought I had been born again just by being exposed, not on the one side to the bad thing, on the other side to these people and the comradeship.
Given what would happen to them in their later careers, can you recall that night you spent with Bill and Hillary?
Yeah. It wasn't, sure. It was, I had decided, I'm afraid there isn't that much to say, but yeah, I decided to go. This was I was in Dallas, and I decided to fly back to New York. I was taking depositions or something. I decided to fly back. It couldn't have been later than '76 through Little Rock, and I called up Hillary. She said that'd be great, and it turned out the plane was 4 hours late. But I got in there, and we went to a restaurant, and I had met Bill before, but we had dinner and went back to his place, and their place, excuse me, and they had a very nice little house. He surely had not run for governor. He may have just didn't become Attorney General first. I think he maybe just was running for Attorney General, which struck me as amazing. So we went then, and 2 other times. And conversation, I had bought a nice bottle of wine. I think it cost me $8. That was the most expensive bottle of wine I ever had, and I gave him, we drank, and it was very pleasant. The second time I went is with Evan and I together and some others, and we went for the first inauguration of Bill Clinton, '79, I would be my guess. And that was utterly fascinating. Seeing our friend Hillary in this public role was utterly fascinating. And we raided the kitchen, the ice box in the governor's mansion that night, you know. And the third time I was with a friend. In fact, he was a friend because his partner was one. She was a paraprofessional. She's now a very, very successful lawyer, paraprofessional. I don't know, one of my 2 or 3 closest friends on earth. But she had a partner, and her partner was flying. I was interviewing, and he and I flew in his 2-engine plane together from Oakland Airport to Westchester County Airport, near where I then lived. And we went to Albuquerque for lunch. Then we stayed in the guest house for dinner while there were hurricane warnings out. And I met young Chelsea, who was coming back from ballet lessons. And that was the second time. And I've seen, even she was senator from New York. I didn't see her but twice on ceremonial occasions during then. And I sometimes wonder whether, given everything that happened, her association with impeachment is something that she looks upon with great fondness. But whatever, I haven't seen her at all. But we did have those 3 times in Little Rock, or as they say in Casablanca, there'll always be Little Rock.